Welcome to the Water People podcast. Today, we're in conversation with shaper and leading technical switch stance surfer Ashley Lloyd, who's helped shape modern longboarding, both with her planer and the creative lines she draws in the water. This episode is presented by the Pryor Family Foundation in partnership with Greening Australia, who believe that our personal, social, and economic well-being are inextricably linked with our land and sea. Greening Australia works to restore Australian land and waters to produce healthy, productive landscapes where people and nature thrive. Learn more about their work via greeningaustralia.org.au. Our podcast comes to you from the coastal land and waters of both the Bundjalung and Gubbi Gubbi nations. We'd like to acknowledge these traditional custodians and pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We'd also like to extend that respect to all First Nations people this podcast ripples out toward. So, we always start with the question about a time or experience after which you were never the same. Do you have a moment like that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, this question is like when I get asked that, I think of a lot of experiences. So it's hard to pick just one. But before I lived in Santa Cruz, I came up here for a surf contest. And I used to kind of be like, I would get second place all the time. Or I'd get to the finals and something would happen. I had one of my friends called it finalitis, but I won the contest up here that I came for. It was at Steamer Lane, and it's like there's a lot of great surfers in there, and it was kind of like a big accomplishment for me to win that. And I remember after the contest sitting on this bench, and I felt kind of sad, and it felt really like I didn't understand why I felt sad, because I won the contest, but I realized that okay, well, winning the contest, I just kind of got lucky with how the judges felt about me that day compared to these other days where I felt like I ought to have won the contest or I didn't. But it was this kind of I don't know. I remember having this epiphany of just of feelings and of emotions, and a lot went into that. But then there I was sitting on the bench alone, feeling sad. And I'm sure you guys have felt this with your amazing surfing and being in contests before, but it only goes so much to have somebody else's validation or approval is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, self-approval versus external forces and the importance of all those things. But the sadness of winning the contest, I don't know what was sad about it. I mean, I had a great weekend. After that, I went to my friend's house. I was with Julie Cox, and she took me to who I ended up living with these people years later, Zoof and Frosty Hessen. Zoof's now passed away. But we had a little dinner barbecue or get together at their house. And it went from this really sad moment to just being with people that I didn't really know that well, but I valued so much. And we were talking about just open-mindedness. I don't know, not that I came from a closed-minded place, but a lot of my life was just a lot the same. I surfed Malibu all the time. Then I surfed Rincon in the winter. And all I did was surf. And there was a lot of the same thinking, And then I went to these people's house, and I was in their living room. And I just remember hearing Zoof talk about being a nurse and being at a convention. And they were doing studies on the heart and how it has memory, and how people with transplants and different things they're working on, how they have memory in their heart. And it went from that to me teaching them how to lift people with 4 fingers, with 4 people on each side, and lifting 230-pound Frosty up with just these fingers under his armpits and his knees, up to the ceiling. And it was a party trick that my stepdad showed me, but we were getting down to talking about what is that? What is that energy? And really feeling this kind of this thing stirring of just like meeting new people and being open to just different thoughts that I'd never been exposed to before, and being accepted for that. And like also just feeling people's hearts thrive, you know. And at that same place, I met my friend Adam, who offered to record my music. And because I would just always go everywhere with my guitar and sing songs. And after that, I traveled to New Zealand and Australia. And then I knew I wanted to record with Adam when I came home, which then brought me eventually to Santa Cruz to live here. So this was like 13, 14 years ago. And here I am now. So this pivotal moment of losing the surf contest kind of like brought me into, winning the surf contest. Did I win it or lose it? Of winning the contest and being sad about it, and like just knowing that there's kind of more to life, and that like finding the little wonders within people is really important, including in ourselves. Like we're all pretty magical. And sometimes we just like either fail to look for it or just like get so busy that we can't slow down for those seconds enough to kind of just honor these little sparkly things that we have in between.
Yeah.
Well, it's great for me to hear you say that, Ashley, because I can really relate to that experience where I grew up in the hyper-competitive surfing world of Australia, which is just like everyone's in beast mode. It's all about winning and playing it down when you do win. And it's a very confusing country in that way with the whole tall poppy syndrome. But I remember getting to a stage as well where as a late teenager, I would go to contests all the time then. And it was mostly for the communal sort of feeling of being with other kids my age and just having a great time and everything. But also we were there to participate in those events. But I remember quite early on feeling strange about the dynamic that we'd all spent a day at the beach and only one person was going to go home deemed a winner and everyone else was going to go home and be called a loser of some sort.
Yeah.
And yet we'd spent a day at the beach, and it was just this very strange complicating of a simple experience and a really blessed experience of being able to go surfing and be down the beach. So I can really
relate to that too. I was in Florida experiencing very similar things. I was also surfing longboard contests and winning sometimes and feeling so sad at the end of the day because I'd beaten my friends. Like I'd surfed with my friends and I just felt really bad for them that because I knew how they felt to be a loser. I knew that feeling well. And I was like, oh no, I don't want them to feel that way.
Yeah.
Just because I happened to get a few, the lucky wave that day or whatever. And I just love the way you put it, that looking for small wonders and how apparent it becomes as I get older, at least, that it's the mundane things that really are so magical. The big events with huge expectations often fail to deliver, but it's the little beach days where you find an octopus in the rock pool or catch a wave that maybe nobody saw, but it felt so good. Those are the magic moments that make up a life that feels really meaningful.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
So did you continue participating in events after that moment?
Yeah, I did. I kept competing.
Did it feel different? Was it different after that?
I think that I kind of saw the whole picture a little more. And I think I probably won more contests after that than I had before. Not like everyone, but I had maybe a little bit of a broader perspective of it's not everything, but it still is like, I do love competing. Like I still do the log jam every year we have out here, which is like the pre-70s contest, which I don't know if I really do love the competing part of it, but just riding those boards. But something about everybody getting out there on the boards is really fun. And so, yeah, like I think after that, I remember having some that still hurt, when I lost. It's not like I had this grand, like I'm cured of whatever it is about contests that make people feel anxiety or whatever. But when I got invited to the duct tape contest, I was super honored to go to that. And it's like, since I've been a mom, I haven't done anything but the log jam. And the waves are pretty crappy. And I lost first round. And that was actually pretty epic, because it was really nice to be invited there and to like actually be put in a hotel and fed and like treated nicer than any other contest that I ever scrapped to figure out how to fly myself to or get there, because I never really had any sponsors. But I had that was another pivotal moment of like, wow, I'm not sad right now. And like that feeling of like just kind of lost, or I could have done better, or, like, sure, I could have done better. Maybe I could have won. But at the duct tape contest, losing first round, and I was like really excited to go. Like I felt like I was even training. At least that was my excuse. Because I'm like, you guys, you got to watch Odin, because I got to train for this contest. But yeah, I don't know. I lost first round, and I was just so comfortable with it. And I had never been that comfortable before, because it just hurt. It hurt my heart so much, because I just wanted to, I don't know, get in that final round. But competing's bizarre. It's like, what is being the best surfer, But like you were saying, Dave, I've met my best friends, it's like when you go there, you're hanging out on the beach and you're going to these traveling to these locations. So
yeah,
there's a lot
and
of magic in that.
there's a lot to be thankful for with that as well. It was very clear to me just a couple of years ago, where I got to have a little surf trip with a bunch of friends who have all competed as young kids and then walked away from that in their 20s or whatever, and everyone said the same thing. I was asking them, okay, why did you start competing and why did you stop? And it was a combination really for a lot of people, where like Brad Gerlach and the Gdauskas brothers and these different cats were all saying it was so much fun to be there with everybody and to have the community experience. But then they probably cared a little too much and took it a bit too seriously. And then, like we were just saying, it's kind of a strange thing, because it's like we don't care that much about the winning, but you kind of do, and you really do care about the losing for yourself and for others. And that's why for me, I choose the word just complicating. It's not that it's like positive or a negative. It's just making something as simple as riding a wave quite complex.
Right.
And for everyone that trip, we were all it was cool to realize that we just had that same feeling of really just wanting to get back to the simplicity and the clear joy and blessing and good fortune that it is to go surfing.
Like you were both saying, the gathering for contests is one of the only community sort of gatherings that we have as a surf culture. I feel like that's a real miss. Like we need to work out, I guess it's happening more and more, but regular gatherings where we can trade boards and hang out on the beach. And
I'm just going to go get our dog, because somebody's probably rocked up at our gate.
No problem.
Sorry to interrupt the conversation, but we wanted to take a moment to recognize the generous folks who have supported us this season. The Water People podcast is brought to you by the fine folks at Sanuk. In 1997, founder Jeff Kelly started out with one simple goal: to make people smile and to encourage them to pass it on. Sanuk has been advocating for a more playful and inclusive surfing culture for more than 2 decades, while crafting some of the comfiest footwear around. Thanks, Sanuk, for your support and for encouraging water people around the globe to protect their happy places. Learn more about Sanuk's partnership with the Surfrider Foundation at sanuk.com. Thanks also to Gary McNeil Concepts, who build cosmic surfboards for cosmic people. We love Gary McNeil's enthusiasm for building boards, and especially his passion for combining recycled and plant-based materials to craft boards that prioritize durability, sustainability, and high performance. For custom orders and to check out the gallery of boards currently available, head to his website, garymcneilconcepts.com.au. So I grew up in the early 2000s trying to soak up every single inch of women's surf media. And there was kind of a lot then compared to now, I feel like, at least in terms of films. And I remember watching a bunch of these kind of semi-homemade logging films from Malibu that featured surfers like yourself. And I remember your surfing so distinctly because of how subtle your approach was and how small your cross steps are in particular. And so I was just wondering, I found it really inspiring to go, oh yeah, you can change up your pacing and the width of your steps, and you can play with the distribution of weight in different parts of your foot. I just remember you playing with trim in such subtle and graceful ways. Were small cross steps a conscious choice, the product of surfing a long point wave, or was that just naturally what was coming from your surfing?
I think a combination. I came across some old photo albums. There's a picture of me surfing in there, and I had a stink bug stance on this particular picture. So I don't know, but I also think I've always been kind of a close foot, upright surfer, leaner. And I surfed mostly Malibu. So it seems to me, gosh, it would be really neat surfing there because people would come from all over the world. And you could kind of, especially throughout California, people would go to Malibu and you could identify certain styles and where they're from, even if or just maybe they're bored in their wetsuit would help you figure it out as well. But I would recognize there's all these subcultures within the different surf communities. And I think that you gather each other's style, whether it's a conscious thing or not. And when you asked me about my little steps, I do remember watching Matt and Brittany. Matt Howard had the tiny little steps and he would walk. And I remember us being like, whoa, he took so many steps. But I don't know that I was trying to surf like Matt. I think I was trying to surf more like Brittany at the time.
Is that Brittany Leonard?
Brittany Leonard, yeah.
She was an amazing surfer that I really looked up to, but I haven't seen anything of her within surf media in a long time.
I think they're down in Mexico, maybe. I'm not sure. But they, at that time, like when I was a teenager, she was a little older than me. And they came from like such a neat classic surfing background and heavy single fins. And I mean, Malibu is kind of the land of the heavy single fin, but they were like another level of that. And so, yeah, whenever they came to Malibu, it was always, I remember that was fun, but I didn't intentionally do those baby steps.
It's a functional difference though. There's a huge difference between taking one big step to the nose and slowing down and having the blades of your feet actually touch and taking 2 or 3 steps to the nose. It's a lot more challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And I loved seeing that in your surfing. I was like, oh, that's something else I could try.
Oh, wow. Well, thanks. You're a great surfer. So what a compliment. Yeah, I don't know. I just, you might as well enjoy the walk, right?
That's a great way to put that.
That's a great seg too.
Well, it was a good thing that I was outside wrangling our dog so he doesn't bark, because I have nothing to add to this conversation because I'm terrible on a longboard. But it does begin for me the inquiry into your switch foot ability, which to me is unrivaled and is amazing. Like, sincerely, I get such a kick out of watching imagery of you surfing. I'd love to be able to be in a lineup and pick your brain as we're surfing all together. But up until this point, it's just been on, surf movies and stuff that I've watched you doing that. And I wanted to ask you what happens in your mind when you're doing that, before and after and during, whatever, if there's a process that you go through, because we do have a friend who's also very, very talented switch footer, and he talks about the sort of the mental game of knowing that if he went his his natural, typical stance, he would be able to do all these flashy things. But if he switches to his new stance, whatever you want to call that, that he'll be a little more limited in his technical ability, but there's a payoff there. So I just was wondering, like, what happens in your head when you're switch footing?
All right. Wow. So growing up surfing Malibu, scrunching through the section, the wave always hitting my back or my butt. When I started to surf switch foot, it was like learning how to surf all over again. So surfing regular foot. And at first it was really hard, and I don't think that I had advantages over it, but I liked that process of, I guess, it just being harder. and and I don't know that I was like that much of an accomplished surfer when I first started, but I was trying to, I don't know, I just thought it would be fun to learn how to do that someday. So eventually I kind of got to a point where it became more comfortable, and especially when like coming around the section front side, I just felt like I could lean into my toes more. So I felt like I could beat the section better being front side instead of on my back, and just like felt the advantages of that. And I think also the moments that I would want to be front side took away from my nose riding, because it was also kind of like that same held up wall that you could get a really good hang 10 at, but instead I was in the middle of my board figuring out how to go switch foot and enjoying that ride. But I almost feel like I became less like not as good of a nose rider when that happened. But to me, I kind of got addicted to like that sensation of, I don't know how to describe it like perfectly about what goes on in my mind.
You're doing great hand movements.
Yeah,
I can see you
only
putting your body.
There's something about like coming off the bottom and adjusting into my toes that I really like how it feels when I'm switch foot. But then things like cross stepping backwards, it takes a lot of thought, like, oh, brushing my teeth with the opposite hand, it's and you just hope that someone's not going to paddle out or like right in front of you, or kind of do something where you have to respond really quickly to, because it's not so automatic. And now it's more automatic for me, but it took a long time to just like sit with the comfort of that, even though I had comfort in being on my toes and getting through the sections. For things like cutting back and cross stepping backwards were probably the harder things.
So that makes me think of your music and the joy that you would experience from learning a new progression or a new song, or having something new come out of you where you feel a different part of your brain come alive, or something like that, where you have the familiar experience of what it is to make music, but you do have new sensations, new neuro pathways lighting up in your brain, and new motor skills coming alive. Is it like that? Is it a similar feeling?
I love that analogy. Yeah, because like you could have a song and your friend will ask you to sing one of your best songs, and sometimes it feels really good to sing that song, right? But you've sung it 100,000 times. So yeah, when you learn a new song, even if you don't know it that well, it feels really good to invite like that feeling of newness and the unfamiliar, which is something I think a lot about now. And I think like I didn't really break it down like this ever before, but just becoming more familiar with the unknown, this whole path we're on right now in the whole world of what's going to happen next. But it's always like that every day. So with Switchfoot, yeah, it kind of pushes that limit for me, and I enjoyed playing with that.
And most people do not. I feel like you are one of a handful of very gifted surfers, but also I feel like it speaks to a personality type, someone who is not content only with mastery of one particular style of wave riding or musical experimentation, but yeah, continuing to stretch and to grow. And I feel like most of us, myself included, I'm just like, nose riding section, hang 10, or, just like I've been okay with just continuing to pursue very similar lines throughout my surfing life. And so I so admire people who are thinking outside of that box completely and are continuing to stretch into like, oh, what would this be like if I was on my toes instead of my heels? And how would I maneuver through this section? It's just, I just am really in awe of people like yourself and our friend Raf here that Dave was speaking about earlier, who is stretching his surfing and himself in so many ways, not only in the water. It's indicative of his personality in general, that openness and the willingness to keep stretching and growing.
Beautiful point, Lauren, and well said. I'm curious then, did the moment of Switchfoot epiphany come long before that moment at Santa Cruz when you won that event and had a bit of a mind break open? Was this an early part of your surfing?
Yeah, I remember trying it when I was at Leo Carrillo for the first time on my brother's board. I think he told me, try to go switch foot or go regular foot. And it was just a disaster, but I stood up and it was cool or a neat experience, but yeah, I think that contest, I'm guessing I was doing switch stance by then. Yeah.
And not only switch stance, but switch nose riding. That is so challenging. Like I challenge anyone who's listening to go and try to switch stance nose riding. It is not easy.
Yeah, it just switch foot in general, but then switch foot cross step a couple of steps.
With momentum and balance thrown in. It is.
Yeah, and without winding up the windows and winding them down again, which is what I do all the time when I'm trying to
There's window winding for me. Yeah, it's funny when sometimes it's just so in the flow, like that moment that I do with my hands that I'm talking about coming off the bottom into the section, like that's so instinctual. And sometimes, so like the actual process of switching is where I feel like I gain it's like some yumminess out of. But then also when it's really fast, like I just surfed this new board and the wave was really fast and steep at this little point break I just went to. And now I stand up switch stance, but it's like it has to be a decision, and this year I went to Honolulu Bay and I surfed it like as big as I've surfed it before. And I hadn't really seen it happen like that. And so I'm going, do I stand up switch or not? Because I know I want to go fast, I want to have that advantage of going fast, and I'm on a shorter board. So the shorter the board, the harder it is for me to switch, because your board flies around when you're trying to walk on it. It used to be a problem when I'd switch to shortboarding because I always want to cross step, but it's like the board comes with you. But that was an interesting experience at Honolulu Bay. And then kind of like thinking about it and then kind of tripping out like, oh no, I don't want to have to think about this when this wave comes. This is really this is a fast wave. And it was heavy. But then like when the actual moment came, that like thought process went away, and it was nice that was like my first experience of kind of letting go. And so that's what's interesting about switch stance, because you have to think about it at first. But then when these moments start happening where it just happens and your thought process is gone and you're just on instinct, it's nice to not have that, the thought process, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
This reminds me of when we were at the beach the other day, Lauren, we were talking about beginner's mind and the joy of having a beginner's mind in the world. So like from martial arts and all kinds of different practices where you retain the humble nature of a beginner, but you also have the excitement of newness. And so what I'm hearing you say makes me think of like the whole martial art of learning moves, learning body mechanics and learning specifics. Same could be said for music, how you're learning chords and learning song structure and all of that, but then you kind of just let it go and that letting go point where you're not thinking, as Bruce Lee would say, you're just feeling, then it sounds like that's where you've gotten to, and that is a peak moment in Honolulu Bay of all waves, to start feeling a naturalness to something that is very unnatural for a lot of us is very cool. And so
it was cool. I can't say I feel that way like deep in the tube. That would be nice when that happens.
Yeah, well, you'd just be rubbing it in if you did say that. That would be a little too much. You can't hang 10, you can't do all the other things and that.
The timing of it, it was neat to have that and feel it. So thanks for asking me about it. It's fun to talk about, and it's neat to talk about with you guys because I don't usually I haven't really broken it down so much, I remember seeing Pinoy Makalena, is that her last name? Pinoy and Maka from Hawaii in some contests that we did. And they were these beautiful surfers doing switch stance, and they were so graceful, and I loved that, but I was just kind of like, oh, okay, here's my goofy foot, here's my regular foot. And Danger Woman Kim Hamrock said to me at one point, she was always in surf contests, and she mentioned whenever you do a maneuver to not just to do the move, but to have it be a functioning maneuver. And so that kind of stuck in my brain. Okay, I do switch stance, and sometimes I think I kept switch dancing so much, I almost felt like it was irritating to watch for other people. I don't care, but I love doing it. And and then when I started thinking about what Kim said about it being functional and starting to feel that off of my toes, I almost was embarrassed to do it if it wasn't functional.
It's so inspiring to hear you talk about continuing to grow and expand your surfing, especially after being pregnant, having a baby, having a business. I'm coming into my mid-30s now and noticing a lot of my friends, mostly women, are letting surfing fall by the wayside. A lot of my female friends have stopped surfing or just aren't that interested anymore. So I'm always hungry for other women, to have friendships and relationships with other women who still have that surf stoke and who are still interested in really pushing their surfing, because I feel like motherhood has inspired me to take more risks in the water. I feel like I'm more interested in stretching my surfing now than I was before. Did you find that at all?
I've gone through phases of it. When I was pregnant, I felt my first, sorry about the dog barking. I don't have David go get the dog. But yeah, so when I was pregnant, it was the first time that I didn't go towards the peak or go towards the outside. I mean, I would if no one was out, and that was my comfort spot, was being on my surfboard, but I would kind of trip out on the other people in the water. So I started, even though I had no trauma, I had that kind of trauma mindset of protective surfing, which isn't it's not always the safest way to surf because you're living in fear. So anytime we're making decisions out of fear instead of love, it's and we're thinking we're doing it for love, but I was surfing smart because I wanted it to be impossible for someone to hit my belly with their surfboard. But I began to have ingrain that pathway of paddle away from the waves, and then having not surfed after the pregnancy for a while, and then having this new body was I don't know. It took me a while to kind of push my envelope again.
Me
which
too.
is what's so neat about the duct tape contest, because it was something about being asked to surf that was really special for me, because it gave me an excuse to claim my time. Okay, guys, I'm going to go all the way down there without our son, being away from my son for the first time. And he was 4, so I've had him a lot where I've had other friends that like left and were just fine with it. But I was so used to just having him with me all the time. And so it was kind of like scary and like but exciting at the same time to have this thing to lead up to and to like work on my surfing and actually be like kind of indulgently having that excuse, which I think like traveling and having these contests to have kind of like a goal that you're working towards. And it's not so much that outcome of the contest that you're happy or sad about if you if you won, but the process is the thing that's so important. And like I think that in life we overlook the process a lot. So I was forgetting my process a bit of just like pushing, I don't know, just taking that, not so much self-indulgence, but just self-care. Like I love doing this and I want to be in the water more. So like getting back to that place kind of took me a while, and I've really felt it over the last 2 years. And like just this idea of restoring, especially in the last year, like how important that is. And I still struggle with it, but I think that being able to restore and replenish, otherwise you kind of have, or it's easier to find resentment to like, you know, the reasons that you're not restoring or whoever else is not helping you or providing time. You know, you have to really claim that for yourself and make that for yourself. So I've been learning to do that more, and it makes everybody else around me a lot happier because they feel that energy, you know?
Yeah, that's so nice to hear. There's so much pressure for motherhood to be a kind of martyrdom, you know, to give ourselves away completely. I was hearing you talking about pregnancy and then getting back into the water after pregnancy. You said this new body.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone talks about how your body changes after you make a human, nourish a human, and grow a baby. But isn't it such a radically different experience to feel the rearrangement of your internal and external body?
It really is. Yeah. Yeah, it's a trip. I mean, your boobs are doing all sorts of things, your hormones, you know, like oxytocin. And, you know, I was just softer, you know, I was getting smaller because I was like kind of shedding weight, but I wasn't as like just strong. And I've always been a real kind of strong, bigger person. And so, it's funny because finally I'm like turning in, I've never been frail, but I remember being like, oh, those frail little girls are so pretty. And like, it's like when I was a teenager, you know, you always want what you don't have. And then when I started kind of getting softer and losing the muscles and, you know, that strength that I always just took for granted, I really more than ever realized just like what a gift even those frail girls, you know, it's like we all have these amazing bodies that we're born with and that we have to nourish and strengthen and rejoice in. And it's a challenge when you're used to it being a certain way, and sure, maybe I'm less pounds, but I just don't have that strength that I used to. And when then my boobs hurt when I paddle, or you know, like I could tell I have to go in now. I didn't pump or whatever. So there's a lot to think about. And so like, even when we are like this martyr and we don't want to be, or we don't realize we're being, it's just this new territory of figuring out how to be a mom and be a good mom. And then having the full circle of like, oh yeah, being a good mom means like really make sure you take care of yourself so that you could teach that to who's watching. You know, like that's what I've heard that recently about. It doesn't matter what words you say, it's what we're doing and what we're putting out there that they're watching and that they're going to learn how to do. So we need to really think about how we want to be in this world and check in and keep checking in and keep watching through their eyes. So I noticed that there was a lack of me of just like rejoicing in me, or maybe I never completely had that, but it's like my new mantra that I'm, when I struggle or have blocks in the world, my new mantra is, how can I rejoice in who I am? Because a lot of times, like, the opposite of that is what blocks me from anything. And so now when I'm struggling, if I can remember to ask myself that question, it really helps to shift my world around, and not in a selfish way, but like a self-loving way that helps, that just seems to help. Like, it doesn't always seem to help, or like I realize that it does in the long run, though, whenever I nurture myself and take care of myself, it really does make a difference. And I'm just like learning that lesson, you know. So I'm excited to talk about it, because I'm not finished learning that lesson. But I'm trying.
We've dived into surfing and switching and a little bit of music and parenting, but also shaping is a big part of your life. And I'm really curious, why?
Why is shaping a big part of my life? Me too.
I know, when you're all itchy and covered in dust and it's loud and you're in a strange little box. So there's got to be a payoff. What is it for you then?
No, there is a payoff. Yeah, today was like a perfect example of the payoff. I went in, I shaped some boards, and I got lost in time, which was awesome. And it's what happens when I'm in there, when I'm shaping. But sometimes it feels like the grind. So it's like, it's just more work. And when it feels like an exploration, or just like that, really, I think, helps keep the balance, just like anything. But so what was the question? Where am I diverting to? Oh, my day. So
yeah, and the payoff.
Why? What's the payoff? So I made this, I had a damaged blank. I had like a fast, kind of high performance sort of longboard, and the tail was just squished in, like the blank got really damaged. So I made it into a swallowtail, and then I couldn't decide how many fins I wanted to put in it, and if I wanted it to be a quad or a single fin. I always love single fins, but I'm like, I don't know. And my friend kind of helped convince me to do a quad plus one.
So that's everything.
Swallowtail. But it's one of the more different boards that I've shaped in a while. But it was really good for me to shape that and kind of get outside of my box by putting a lot of boxes in. And I surfed it for the first time today. And it was a hot day, and I got in the water, and I had to kind of duck through this wave that broke on me. And it just felt so good. Like the day of shaping 3 boards. And then, like, there's something about the cleanse of getting back in the ocean and like being on this brand new board that I'm really stoked on. I have no idea if it's going to work or not. I'm riding it as a single fin today, but, it worked really great. And I wasn't sure what it was going to do. I had the craziest feeling, like a floater. Once I came down, it kind of rocketed once I landed. And it was I would love you guys to try this board, but it was a really neat sensation, right? The new sensations that we're talking about, that we could keep opening up with different shapes. And for me, it's like, I feel like it's a practice that I'm getting better at, but shaping a board, there's a lot to it, you know, and I have beautiful compliments on my shapes, and in my mind, a lot of times I'm still getting there, you know. It's because you could always perfect your craft more and more. So there's a lot of certain shapes that maybe people come to me because they know I'm longboard, so they order longboards from me. But sometimes the hardest boards to shape are also like my favorite ones, because it's something outside of the box that someone asked me to make, and it takes more energy, but I have to get in a certain place, like the certain mindset, to feel like I have more of a mastery over it. And I don't even know the whole time, like, until it gets in the water and this person gives me a good progress report of of how it works. So when I'm shaping boards for myself, which I don't do very often, it's really fun to ride a new board. And when I'm shaping boards for other people, it's really such a cool thing to hear someone be stoked about the board I made them, basically. And I've had people tell me that their board changed their life. Like sometimes I'm like, why do I shape surfboards? Like it's such a kind of by myself in this shaping room, and how is it helping the world? There's all this waste. But then, you get someone that just, it lights up their day, and they have this union with their surfboard, or like a new stone in the path that they need to go on with their surfing evolution. So it's just like an honor to be able to do that for people. And sometimes I wish there was more of me that could just do a bunch of hand shapes all day long. And if I had the means, I would just like shape boards for all these different people that I think about what board would work perfect for them when I see them in the water. But I feel limited with time a lot. So I don't really make any money shaping boards. So I'm trying to kind of figure out, why do I? It's for all those reasons is why I shape boards. But a lot of times I'd rather just be struggling as a rock star, wannabe rock star.
So are you putting the planer backwards and switching it to your opposite hand and doing all that kind of thing in the shaping bay? Is that why it's taken long?
Not usually. I do try to shape ambidextrously. Like
so you do.
You do.
Do you turn your bass around, and you do turn your guitars around the other way as well? This is trend.
I don't do that with guitars. I'm very guitar. I'm kind of limited.
Okay. All right. Do you chop your food with the handle of the knife and stuff like that?
But I try to brush my teeth with the opposite hand and do hip circles at the same time.
Definitely a few patterns that we're seeing here.
Speaking of waste, Ashley, you work with the EcoBoard certification. What does that mean? And can you talk about what kind of materials you're experimenting with your boards?
Yeah. So Sustainable Surf is an organization that actually came to my factory and audited our glass shop to see our practices, and also encourage us how we could shift things to do things more sustainable. So yeah, we're green certified by them. And my husband actually helped start that whole thing. So he built our factory, and before I would just outsource our glassing, and I always wanted to use this bio resin, but it was really hard to get people to glass with it. And he was in between jobs, and he had glass boards before, and he's like, why don't we just do it? You shape them, I'll glass them. So it was really like a big undertaking to build a whole glassing facility and just commit completely to that resin and figure out all the tricks about it, because it's not as easy to work with as the traditional stuff. What's
it actually made from?
So they changed their formula, but they basically get different byproducts, for example, the cashew nut industry, and they have a lot of different ways to source the oils that they get, but I think it's 60% less of a bio footprint. So they track everything that it's from. But there's been a lot of different experimental foams that I've used. And now they're working on making an algae foam out of chitin, which I'm pretty excited about. I think that's the right term, like shrimp shells. So I haven't tried that yet, but that's the latest kind of more polyurethane feeling foam. But right now the core of my boards, most of my boards are recyclable EPS. So if I have a board machined through Marco foam, all of the offcuts, 100% of the offcuts go into different foam products, which is pretty rad because there's a lot of waste at the end of the day when it comes to that.
So you're using a lot of the Marco stuff, and then what are you wrapping the boards in then? What fabric are you using?
Mostly fiberglass, but we're using a ton of flax these days.
Oh yeah, I was hoping you were going to say that.
Yeah, that's the board today was made not purely of flax. It also had fiberglass, but we've done our first couple of boards that are just flax. So it's kind of like surfboards are pretty expensive to make. So every step we take is usually a baby cross step to the nose. But just cracked myself up there. But yeah, it's like when the big leaps, like the board will be wasteful if it's too big of a leap. So I've been hoping that the flax works, but I've been kind of like, oh gosh, I don't want to build this board and then have it fall apart. But they're actually, it's been amazing. I rode this shorter board that I made. I took it to Fiji and rode it at Cloudbreak for the first time. Not super pumping, but it was still Cloudbreak, and it didn't break. It was actually really strong, and it's holding up beautifully. Flax is really strong. I don't know if you've ever tried to take down a flax plant, but the leaves are they're very long and fibrous. And so the strength and how there's a few different kinds of flax cloths that we'll use, but the strength is amazing. So when you pair it with EPS foam, it just has a really beautiful feeling. I don't know if you guys have tried flax yet.
Yeah. I'm just trying to hold myself back here because
okay. Yeah.
I'm generally the flax pusher in our neighborhood here.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
So it's really exciting to hear you talk about this because a friend of mine, Gary McNeil, and I, we've been wrapping our boards, so 8 guns down to 5-7 twin fin fishes in the flax for about 4.5 years. And
awesome.
And the one board that I use the most around here in waves of consequence all the time, and I'm falling over all the time in the water, has yet to be creased, has yet to be broken. So in nearly 5 years, I haven't broken a single board wrapped in the flax.
Awesome.
I've also experienced zero aging in the flex of these flax boards. So the one board I have in particular is a 5-7 fish, and it's the Marco foam, and then we put a Divinacell stringer in the middle. So it's a high density foam and wrapped it in flax. It does have the fiberglass over it as well. But that board is my go-to board, and it feels as springy now, nearly 5 years on, as it did when I first got it.
That's so awesome.
And then also, so the flex thing's amazing. The strength is a complete 100% success, yet to break one. And then the compromise of performance is non-existent. To me, this board feels exactly like the standard PU board that everyone's obsessed with because of that combination, like you said, of the flax and the strength of the flax with those EPS foams.
Yeah.
It sits in the water in a way that standard glass and cloth with EPS is really buoyant, and so I've just been pushing the flax thing on everyone because of all of those things, and that longevity and performance is just so amazing. So that's really cool to hear you say. Are you doing flax in your longer boards or just shorter
the board
stuff?
today? I mean, it's kind of a trippy board, but the board today. That's what I love about it is you could really add the weight to the board, and it just gives that the pinginess goes away, that tappity tap. It's just like how it moves on the water is so much more fluid, right? So for the longboards, if someone wants to have the most sustainable longboard, then making it with EPS foam, recyclable EPS foam with the flax, and just making sure it has enough weight, because I think that's a big part of weight for longboards, for heavier single fin, for glide, and for nose riding. If you don't have that weight and you come from that more traditional longboard background, then it doesn't feel right. But we've been making it enough where it feels like it replaces the feeling of the EPS flax for me, but I also feel it's sort of a category of its own. The way it moves through the water is it's really beautiful. And it almost sounds like a boat or something to me. Like the sound is a little bit different. I don't know if you experience that at all.
Yes, and yes, totally. Every board I've ever had in my life from a mentor of mine, Dick Van Stralen, he always taps it when he hands it over to him. He's like, "Do you hear that? Do you hear the life in it? It's got a different note. This one. Wait till you get it in the water." And he's right, and you're right. And so, are you with your flax boards? Lauren, you're going to have to pull me up because I'll just go on for days with this subject with Ashley. But are you leaving them like unsprayed? You're not covering them in color? Are you leaving it so you can see the color, that purpley color, and then it turns browner, but it doesn't age in like, the yellow old clear boards we have?
Right. I just think it's so beautiful. And we've only done 2 that are only flax. We've gone really light on the fiberglass for most of them. Yep. So now we're like getting into this whole new realm. So we've done the combination, but yeah, the boards that are all flax are just as great. There's like a fuzziness with the fabric on parts that we wouldn't get with the fiberglass. So like some cosmetic things are, I don't know. I think the flax is really beautiful. Like I love the character of the weave of the cloth and everything. And so it's just like rewiring how we're thinking. A lot of people are worried about the look, or like if it frays on the edge, or you could actually see the seam, but it's like, this is what your board is made out of, and it's beautiful because of that. So I love things like that.
I do too. I love seeing the more handmade elements in a hand-shaped craft, especially incorporating natural materials. And I feel like it's such a refreshing direction to hear shapers like yourself talk about moving back toward the handmade feel, and away from the sort of mechanized picture of a technically perfect pop-out board. What's the difference for you between a hand-shaped board and a pop-out?
I mean, I do a lot of boards that aren't completely hand-shaped these days. And so like, I feel conflict about a lot of comments sometimes that are made about computer boards. Before I shaped any, it sounded really soulless to me, because I was so familiar with my planer. I didn't understand like why someone would want a board off of a computer. And then right before I got pregnant, I learned how to design boards through like the software program. And it was a really interesting exploration for me, because it was definitely another one of those tests of shifting my ways of thinking, and like not wanting to have that pop out feel, and that like not connected feel to the board. But it also kind of turned into like another one of my tools. So just as like the power planer came into hand with surfboard shaping, so it's designing the boards on the computer. But I kind of have like a different, I don't know, I have a different approach, because I actually design each board specifically. It's kind of neat, because I feel like I'm looking at it from the inside out instead of always just sculpting it from the outside in. So for me, I like the combination of being able to get there, whether it's a complete hand-shaped and like a brand new experiment of a board for me, or like a board that I designed a file for and that I'm finishing and adding touches to, with like the combination of this really quality glassing that's better for the environment. So yeah, there's like, I think that people find a lot of joy. Like earlier, you guys were talking about, what was it? The seriousness of the surf contest. How like there's something about when it shifts out of just the fun of it into like, you have this thing that you're supposed to win. It gets really serious, and like some of the beauty is lost. That is the one saving grace about the wave storm. Like I hate wave storms, because it's like, there's so many out there, like people could trash them and return them to Costco, and like who really knows who's making them or what kind of practices they have. And there's so much pollution in the world. But at the same time, the one thing I do like about the wave storm is like that seriousness is lost. And I think that besides that it's a cheap board, like, and it feels safe to people, I think that like that is there's beauty in everything, right? So that's the beauty I see in that pop out, is the seriousness is lost, and it helps people kind of lighten up sometimes. I think it's kind of coming full circle now, because people are starting to get really serious on their wave storms now.
Oh dear.
the craft, I mean, like being a craftsperson, there's a lot of tools to be used. And no matter what kind of board I'm making, it's really important to me to like find connection with the board or that person that I'm making the board for, whether I'm spending 3 hours on it or 45 minutes, because I have my tool that helped me out. Like having that connection and seeing like achieving the shape that I'm hoping for them. It's really important to me.
Bing Surfboards just came out with a film, Think Bing, celebrating 60 years of Bing Copeland as a shaper and a surfer. You spent time under the Bing label. What did you pick up from your time at an institution like Bing?
Yeah. Gosh. Yeah. I mean, Bing is such a sweet guy, and his shapes are just like tried and true through time. I didn't actually learn shaping from Bing. When a couple years into shaping, when Bing asked me to be on their surf team, and I was like, oh my gosh, Bing, no way, that's amazing, because I always respected their shapes, but I also didn't want to give up this shaping that I had started. And then we figured out how to have it so that I had like a model with them, and then another model with them. So I had a couple models with them. So I already was into shaping, and then got to really kind of like anytime whether you're in the shaping room with someone or not, like I think I learned a lot from Matt Calvani, right? The head shaper for Bing now, but more so just like being exposed to the surfboards. Like for me, I've learned a lot of my shaping mentors they don't actually know they're my mentors, because I don't necessarily like physically spend time with them, but I do with their surfboards. So by studying them and being on the Bing team was kind of neat, because they have so many different shapes and so many beautiful shapes. So for me, like just being a part of that was a really big honor. But yeah, also sort of like, how do we do this? Because I want to continue to do my own thing. So that question was there.
So have you got right now, considering your story about that recent sort of salvaged blank and the quirky tail and the every fin configuration board that you've done, aside from things like that pop up, because of damaged blanks and just wanting to use them, what are you like zoomed in on the most with your surfboards and your surfing right now?
Well, that shifts every day, but yeah, it shifts every day. I was riding this nose rider that I made for the husband. He didn't like it that much. I call it the saggy water balloon model, where it's like
so flattering,
hips further back,
and you didn't like it. That's so strange. Tail.
I really like the board, so I've been surfing that. And I had a friend tell me, for some reason, he thinks he saw me do one of those backwards tails where you're like your feet are first and your fin is first, but your face first to the wave. And I was like, no, I've never done one of those, but they seem really cool. But no, I've never really invested the time to figure out how to do that. It's super weird. He's like, no, I swear I saw you do it in the video. No, I've never done that before. It's so funny. But ever since he said that, I've been obsessed with trying to do it. And this is part of me letting go, because I feel like it's pretty goofy, like trying to paddle backwards, and it's really hard, like not just hard to time the wave, but you're using a whole different set of muscles, so it's exhausting. And you're like hoping that someone's not paddling out that you're gonna like take out in the face with the fin first. So I'm actually super excited about that right now, and I'm like releasing the need for approval with things. I don't care if
if you run someone over.
I don't care if I look goofy, if I'm like paddling backwards again. I really want to get this move down. So,
and have you got one? Have you done it yet?
I did it. I'm so happy. It's really hard to do and like actually stay in the face, right? So when I first started doing it, I'm like, I have to study how other people actually do this, because are they standing up before it spins around, or does it just spin and you belly board it? So I'm more of a belly boarder spinner and then stand up right as I get in the face. But yeah.
Wow, that's classic. CJ Nelson has an amazing one of those in one of Thomas Campbell's movies from New Zealand.
I should watch that.
Yeah, that's the one. He does it like very gracefully, makes it look really annoyingly easy.
I think it helps having like a bigger board. And I finally figured out my paddling technique. You need like elbows out and hands under. Otherwise you kind of get more restricted and it's more exhausting. So once I figured out my elbows.
Lauren's making those movements right now. This is a good influence. You're a great influence, Ashley. Lauren's going to be trying so many new moves after this chat.
Just do it. I'm having fun with it.
Just a quick reminder that we're running our annual giveaway. We're teaming up with our sponsors Sanook and Gary McNeil Concepts to give away some cozy footwear and for one lucky listener, a brand new custom Gary McNeil surfboard. To enter, all you have to do is hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. Don't forget your name so we can find you, and let us know what you think of the Water People podcast. You'll be entered to win a new custom board in time for the holidays. By rating and reviewing the podcast, you're really just helping us to get the word out, which keeps us digging up new stories and storytellers from our global ocean culture. Thanks to Ashley for nerding out with us today on the more technical aspects of the surfing experience. Special thanks always to our sound engineer and in-house musician, Shannon Soul Carroll. On behalf of myself, Lauren Hill, and my partner in rhyme, Dave Rastovich, thanks for making the time to listen with us. We'll be continuing the conversation on Instagram, where we're at Water People Podcast. You can find every episode and some extras on our website, waterpeoplepodcast.com.